National Dialogue's first national convention at the University of South Africa's main campus in Pretoria on Saturday could not finalize constituting the steering committee. Mandisa Khanyile, a member of the convention organizing committee, said some formations or sectors are not yet ready to make a decision regarding who they are going to have as their steering committee nominee. Here to give us analysis and more, we're joined by political analyst Mbeki Moeletsi. Mr. Mbeki, good afternoon. Thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it. Perhaps to start the conversation here, and we'll rewind to before the convention took place. The criticism that the National Convention, the first National Convention faced, and I guess by extension the National Dialogue holistically, from some of the legacy foundations, that it was not citizen-led. But there wasn't a clear indication on what was meant by citizen-led, either on their part or on part of the government and some of the proponents of the National Dialogue. As things played out, and as you've observed it over the last 2 days, it certainly didn't go without hiccup. There were moments where there was a stop-start situation, where there was no clarity on it. And of course, there were a lot of teething problems, a lot of learnings took place in real time. Can you say that you think that the National Convention was, by and large, citizen-led, whatever that may mean?
Well, from what I could see, Oliver, this really was led by the government. It was convened by the government, funded by the government, and all the key decisions were made by the government. So that was against the original intent. Now, I'm not saying the government shouldn't have done what it did, but the original intent was that it was not going to be the government that was going to be making all the key decisions. And you must remember, the ANC is very anxious, was very anxious, and still is very anxious that it should not become accused number one in the National Dialogue. And that's why President Ramaphosa is very insistent on government role in the National Dialogue, so that the National Dialogue doesn't turn the government into the whipping boy of the failures, which ironically President Ramaphosa himself listed the failures actually of South Africa and of the government in the last 30 years: unemployment, poverty, inequality, all those things he listed, as if that the ANC and the government was an innocent bystander. So anyway, that's what happened.
Is it truly fair to say that all the decisions was made by the government and it was led entirely by the government, given that the preparatory task team still had civil society representatives being a part of it and being intimately involved, not just in the organizing, but in the execution of the weekend, presiding over some of the plenary sessions? Not just civil society, Labour was also to a very large extent involved in the preparatory task team. But ultimately, they now have to hand over the process to the organizations and representatives, more than 1,000 of them, that gathered there this weekend, and they have to choose amongst themselves those that will steer the process for them. Is it fair to say that that government sort of had the monopoly on the decision-making there?
No, I don't think the government had the decision-making, but it was the organizer and it was the convener. But that's water under the bridge. There were civil society organizations, many of them had been working with the legacy foundations, so they understood how this process should go forward, and they were party to those decisions. So I think now we have to see what the steering committee looks like and what it proposes to do going forward.
Do you feel that the idea of a steering committee that emanates from within these organizations, community representatives that are present there, is the right approach, and that organ is the right organ to be the ultimate decision maker? Or do you think that they will face tension when it comes to the use of resources, for instance, given that they now have to make decisions about resources, money and otherwise, that has been made available by and large, and in large part by the government. The state, of course, is putting 270 million rand into this and hoping that civil society and the private sector will be able to fundraise the other 180 million rand to make up the 450 million rand in total that they had budgeted this for. Or do you think that the steering committee, are you hopeful that it will have the sort of autonomy it needs to be able to make this a truly citizen-led process?
Well, I think the steering committee has been given an impossible task, to tell you the honest truth. Remember, for the last year, the legacy foundations, together with many civil society organizations, had been preparing for the national convention. So that involved a lot of decisions that had already been made. Now these decisions have been thrown out of the window with the departure of the Legacy Foundation. So the incoming steering committee is supposed to come up with solutions in 2 or 3 weeks that have taken many months before to arrive at. So I think one shouldn't expect too much from the steering committee, because really they don't have the time that the previous organizational structure, which was called the Preparatory Committee and the Preparatory Task Team, that structure was a structure that had all the months to prepare for the National Convention and the way forward. But once that structure got sidelined and got bypassed, now there's a lot of improvising that is happening. And when you have 1,000 people and you are improvising, then there's going to be a lot of disappointment.
Yeah, we were told that the purpose for the first national convention is 2 things. To establish if there is indeed a need for a national dialogue on the one hand, and secondly, how it ought to play out. I think we sort of all went into this with the foregone conclusion that there is a need for the national dialogue. But having evaluated how things played out over the weekend, do you think that question needed to be front-loaded and answered sincerely?
Well, the question of the national dialogue, has been discussed. Nobody quarrels with the idea of a national dialogue. I think many people have rather exaggerated expectations of what the national dialogue will come up with. But the concept itself is not a bad idea. There's no harm in citizens, because we have to face it, Oliver. We have a government that has failed in the eyes of the population of South Africa, in the eyes of the citizens of South Africa. The ANC has been in power for 30 years, and it was elected on a program for advancing the welfare of the great majority of citizens of the country. This has not happened. After 30 years, we are sitting with 40% unemployment. We are sitting with 27% of children in South Africa stunted because of malnutrition and all the ills that you all know about. So we have a government that has failed, and the citizens have a right to say, look, let's think again, because this one has failed, and they want to say, how do we go about moving forward, and what should be done to have a government that will not fail. You see, one of the problems why the government has failed is because the South African government is not accountable to the citizens. Once you vote for a party. You don't vote for a member of parliament. Now, the question of introducing members of parliament and constituencies is one of the primary challenges that has led to the failure of an unaccountable government. Now, these are all the issues that the national dialogue has to address. I don't know if the new organizers really have the time to address all these issues.
Do you think we might all be surprised and that the national dialogue finds that for most South Africans, their lives are indeed better off compared to 31 years ago? We may have a back and forth about what the right indices are to measure the progress of any state, or particularly this state are. We might look at stunted growth on the one hand, but we might also look on the other hand and say, hey, life expectancy due to increased access to primary health care has improved, and therefore we're generally a healthier population than we were 31 years ago. More people have access to clean drinking water and electricity than 31 years ago. Do you think that the process might actually surprise us and make us realize that, hold on, the lens through which you and I evaluate state progress may not be the lens through which most other South Africans evaluate state progress, because we perhaps for the very first time are having a broad-based conversation that are meant to bring people from all different walks of life, quite literally, together into one room to have continuous conversations about things. Do you think we might actually learn something about how South Africans view their own progress or lack thereof?
Well, it's not that we don't know. There are opinion polls that are taken very regularly in South Africa to find out what the population thinks, and those opinion polls are fairly accurate. So we know what the population, for example, we know that the population of South Africa has very low trust in political parties, has very low trust in government, but has very high trust in civil society and has very high trust in the private sector. So we know that. But the second point, you are comparing the performance of a democratic government to the performance of an apartheid government. The democratic government should be compared with the performance of other democratic governments, not with the performance of apartheid. If you compare South Africa to other democratic middle-income countries in the world, the performance of the South African government in the past 30 years has been abysmal by any standard. If you compare it to Chile, if you compare it to Thailand, if you compare it to Indonesia, if you look at the economic growth rates, if you look at life expectancies, all that, you have to compare apples with apples. You can't compare apples with oranges. You have to compare the democratic government to other democratic governments, to performance of other democratic middle-income governments.
More aptly, can't compare apples to rotten apples. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you, Mr. Mbeki. Really do appreciate your insights on this. Moeletsi Mbeki, political analyst, joining us there.